Hello, reader and friend of all things Outlander. The story of Outlander wants to release you, and I want to talk with you today about how. And I'm going to base this on episode 8 of season 4, Wilmington. And I think it's really appropriate to talk about this at the new year because everybody in that episode has a standard. And some people are really blowing it when it comes to having high standards. And I'm somebody who personally has always felt a little shy and embarrassed about my high standards and how to communicate them to people because of some of the reasons that this show talks about. Now, that's my perspective on Wilmington. What was yours? I'd love to hear. We talk about how Outlander has changed our lives, and I'm here to help us get specific. And so each Saturday I take the most recent episode and talk about some of the themes. So interestingly enough, I have high standards for this show, and I've been a little embarrassed about that. I haven't wanted to appear caustic or angry towards other fans or towards producers of the show. And so I've been a little quiet about it. But my standards are not being met right now. And so as we talk through this episode, I'd be interested in your perspective, and I'm going to do my best to be honest about those standards, but also to lead a diplomatic conversation. So on that note, let's fall through the stones together and talk about this last episode. But just in case you need one, grab a gemstone and be sure to subscribe to Jenny Wells Reads on Facebook or to my YouTube channel, Jenny Wells Reads, so that you don't miss any of these discussions. And if you're joining me live or after the fact on Facebook, please give me your thoughts as well. All right, so everybody in this episode had high standards. The first person I think of is Governor Tryon. He has high standards. He has high standards for all the people around him, including the taxpayers who are paying for his new palace. Okay. He also has high standards for surgeons, and Claire does not qualify. And one thing I notice about Governor Tryon is that he has a lot of privilege. He's a man of the king. He's come to the New World. He's able to give away 10,000 acres, build a palace, and be, of society. Well, if we're going to have high standards, if we're going to go into the new year, make our resolutions, try to make a better life, we need to be aware of our privilege in a way that Governor Tryon wasn't. And I think that's part of the reason that I've been ashamed of my high standards, is because I've worried that they would come off arrogant, pompous, as if, I'd forgotten that I was born into California as a white woman to, relatively well-off parents and grandparents. So it's okay to have high standards. It's not okay to build it on the backs and at others' expenses. All right, so then there's Roger. Roger and Bree have standards. Okay, Roger insists on being married to Bree before they have sex together. Bree finally agrees, and what happens? They have a wonderful night together, and then it all goes to, I don't like to say the word on my videos because that's one of my standards, is to not swear, at least not in public. But it all goes to shit, right? And it's because of the way they handle their standards. Now, I would argue that Bree does a pretty good job of holding her standards because she makes it about herself. She's like, listen, you can't do this to me. You talked to Fiona before you talked to me. I expected more from you, and I didn't get it. I may be a wife, but you can't just tell me what to do. I am going to live my own life. And so I respect Bree for that, because she doesn't start throwing shade at Roger, but Roger does the opposite. Roger starts throwing shade at her. He brings up her past. He tells her, he plays armchair psychologist and starts to tell her what her problem is. He doesn't keep it about himself. He has standards. They're okay. He wants to be married to Bree. He wants them to make love in a very special and connecting way. And for him, that means being married first. That's okay. It is not okay to start throwing shade at other people if they don't meet our standards. And then I think of Stephen Bonnet. Even Stephen Bonnet has standards. And I want to get his line just right. He says, I am an honest man for a pirate, right? So in his mind, even though he is completely devastating Bree, he thinks he has standards, and he's going to live up to those standards. He's an honest man, even for a pirate. So sometimes we can deceive ourselves with our high standards. So my question for you today is, as you're going into the new year, what are the standards you want to have for yourself? Which reminds me, okay, we had a glaring example in this week's episode of what happens when you have no standards. And I think of the people in the pub who witness Bree's rape. Men and women have let go of their standards, and they do nothing. And the most chilling part for me was not even the smirks on some of the men's faces, but the absolute apathy, the absolute flatness. We even saw that in some of the girls of the night. And so when we don't have any standards, that's a problem too. And there's a lot of argument this time of year, like, oh, I'm not going to do resolutions. I don't believe in resolutions, whatever. But I would just wonder what standards you want to have for yourself. And for me, I do get reflective this time of year, and I do have high standards. But what I've had to learn is that my standards cannot be based on other people in a way that just throws shade at them for not meeting them. But I have to elevate my standards and stay true to what matters to me. Now, I can't figure out how to handle that yet with the show, because honestly, the show is letting me down. Here's a simple example. The writers had Roger tell Bree, "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Okay, well, the problem with that is that Jamie has used that line towards Claire just in last season in their reunion episode. And it always gives me kind of like a letdown. It's like I want to believe in Bree and Roger just on their own and their own merits. And I don't want to be reminded of Jamie and Claire, who I adore, in the middle of Bree and Roger's sex scene. So that was a super letdown for me. I don't want the writers to get lazy. For me, the writing is subpar right now, and just nothing can compare to season 1 when Ronald D. Moore and Ira Stephen Bear and these people who were really, really, really high quality and had high standards were involved. So I'm trying to figure out what to do about my standards without throwing shade too much at all the producers and writers. So that's my little thing. So there we go. That's my discussion for today. If you have any ideas or thoughts that you would like to contribute, even after the fact, I would love to hear your thoughts. I always read all of your comments. And I would ask you this week, how do the stones call to you? What kind of themes are coming up for you as you're watching and reading Outlander? When you say that Outlander has changed your life, what does that mean? How can we get specific? I'm always here on Saturday mornings, 10 o'clock Pacific time, to talk about that. So let's make the magic more than a fantasy, because discovering a good story helps you live a good story. What can your story be? Happy New Year, everybody. I'll see you next week.